Hello mamas and welcome back to the Pregnancy with Physio Laura podcast. Today we are kicking off the Pregnancy Nutrition series, delving into the specific nutrient requirements for each individual trimester of pregnancy. Now this is episode 1 of a 5-part pregnancy nutrition series with the wonderful Larissa Telfer. Larissa is an accredited practicing dietitian and diabetes educator who is passionate about helping women to understand nutrition through pregnancy and beyond. Now, let's get into episode 1 of our 5-part pregnancy nutrition series. You are going to love today's chat with Larissa as we unpack each individual trimester of pregnancy and what specific nutrients you may require in each. Enjoy! Welcome to the podcast, Larissa. It is so wonderful to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. I'm super excited that you're here to share your time because I know that so many Pregnancy Posse members and all of my social media audience, so pregnant women in general, just feel really lost when it comes to nutrition and what to eat in the pre-postnatal phases of life. I think it's a bit of a minefield, as we were just talking about before you jumped on. And so I'm excited to have you here just to sort of bust through all of the chaos and all of the noise out there and just give us like the straight up facts and information that we need to know. So I thought we'd start with delving straight into it. Let's start with pregnancy. So you've just found out you're pregnant. What do you need to know about the nutrients that are important to be consuming during pregnancy and why?
Yeah, great. So I think what we might do is even break it up into trimesters a little bit, because I think that it does change a little bit as pregnancy progresses, and how women feel and what's important and the issues really change as pregnancies move along, as you know. Starting off with the first trimester, interestingly, in the first trimester, our calorie requirements don't actually increase. So there's a minor increase. However, I guess because a lot of women often reduce their activity because they're tired or not feeling very well, generally, most women aren't actually needing any extra calories in the first trimester. So I think this is really important to remember because a lot of women sort of, they're like, oh, I'm pregnant, now I'm eating from 2 from the start. So it's really good to keep that in mind for the first trimester. Saying that though, I guess our nutrient requirements do increase in the first trimester. So developing baby, all that development that happens early on in the first trimester does require extra nutrients. I think the first trimester is about quality over quantity.
So all those extra hash browns are not necessary.
Not necessarily. It doesn't mean you can't have some here or there, but yes, you certainly don't need to be eating for 2 at any point in pregnancy, particularly not in that first trimester.
So what nutrients specifically are important for that first trimester, Larissa?
Yeah, so I think a key one, which most people are quite familiar with, is folate or folic acid. There's just 2 different names for the same thing. So our requirements for folic acid increase quite significantly from the start of pregnancy. And this is because folic acid plays quite a crucial role in the development of the neural tube and also healthy cell development and DNA synthesis. That is all occurring from the beginning of pregnancy. Most women will be recommended, ideally we should be starting folic acid supplement actually before pregnancy. So ideally at least a month before pregnancy. As we know, not all pregnancies are planned though. So as soon as you find out that you might be pregnant, it's certainly we recommend to be starting some sort of folic acid supplementation as soon as possible.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So it's not just from diet. You feel like we definitely need to have some sort of extra supplementation?
Yeah. So the recommendations certainly are that we do need to supplement folic acid. And that comes from the research around neural tube development. I guess the supplementation of folic acid has shown to be really crucial in the prevention of neural tube defects, such as spina bifida.
And is that for the entire pregnancy or just for the first trimester?
So yes, we do actually need to continue that folic acid supplementation through the pregnancy. Some women do actually have higher folic acid requirements than others. For example, women with underlying conditions like diabetes actually prefer a much higher dose of folic acid, particularly in the first trimester, than other women.
Okay.
It is important to check in with a dietitian or your doctor about if you are taking the right dose of folic acid, because it's actually not just one size fits all, which is really important. Yeah.
And I know we're going to delve into postnatal nutrition later in our chat, but is it something that you would then continue postnatally, or is it just specific to pregnancy, that importance of folic acid?
There is also a slight increase for when you're breastfeeding as well. And I also think it comes down to the quality of someone's diet during breastfeeding too. Again, that's something that it's good to check in with a dietitian if you're not sure, you think you might be needing more folic acid, or if you feel like there is some gaps in your diet, then there is certainly breastfeeding supplements available. Yeah.
And coming back to the first trimester, is it worthwhile trying to eat foods that are rich in folate or folic acid as well? Would you recommend that, or just stick with the supplementation?
No, we definitely want to be including foods that are good sources of folic acid too. Nutritional supplements in pregnancy are definitely a supplement to a healthy diet. They're not going to provide all of the vitamins and minerals that you need to be having.
And have you got some examples of foods high in folate?
In Australia, breads are actually fortified with folic acid to help with making sure women are achieving folic acid, which is quite good because I know lots of my women in the first trimester, if they're quite unwell, they're living off toast. So it's good that to know even if you're quite unwell and you're potentially eating quite a bland diet, you can actually still get enough folic acid. Other sources of folic acid are things like vegetables, legumes, lentils, green leafy vegetables particularly as well. So
yeah, okay, that's
certainly
great.
things to be including regularly. Yeah.
I remember when I was pregnant, I can't remember if it was the first or second time round, but okra was one of the vegetables that was high in folic acid. And I just remember thinking, I don't know how to eat this, how to cook this. All of the ones you just listed sound much more appetizing to me than just having a whole heap of okra.
Especially if it's not something you cook regularly or it's not a traditional food for you. Yeah.
I've had it in my life.
Yeah. No, you can certainly find things that are part of your usual intake to optimize your folic acid without having to eat strange things you don't normally consume. Yeah.
So is that the main one you want to be thinking about for the first trimester, or is there others as well?
The other one is iodine as well. Like folic acid, our iodine requirements actually increase from the beginning of pregnancy. And again, this is another key nutrient that we do recommend to supplement from the start of pregnancy. So most of your, standard pregnancy multivitamins will include iodine as well.
Okay, so it's not a separate one necessarily that you'll have to get, as long as you read the packet and it's got both folic acid and iodine included.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And is the reason behind that, again, because of the neural tube, or is it a different part of the development that's important for?
Slightly different. Iodine's actually required for our healthy function of our thyroid. Our thyroid hormones control our metabolism. Babies actually relying on the mother's thyroid hormones and iodine for the regulation of their growth and development as well. It's also required to support babies' metabolism and that nervous system development and brain development from the beginning of pregnancy. Like folic acid, those iodine requirements actually increase right through the pregnancy.
Yeah, okay. That's really interesting. So then when we hit the second trimester, how might these nutrient requirements change?
So once we get into the second trimester, there is a small increase in calorie requirements as babies starting to grow and needing more energy. So on average, it's around an extra 300 calories is, the extra energy that we're needing for the second trimester.
And what does that look like? Because I know when someone says that, I think, oh, yes, 300 calories. But can you give an example of like a little meal or a snack that might equate to 300 calories?
Yeah, so generally I suggest to try and include this as part of some healthy snacks as well. It might not be that you need to be eating, larger meals. It might be including some healthy snacks across the day. Snacks like, a small tub of yogurt, a small handful of nuts, and a piece of fruit might add up to that as well. As I said, I generally prefer people to try and add in healthy snacks and still have their healthy meals along with that too.
Yeah, I think that's really good, because I think 300 calories to most women doesn't really mean much. But when you say yogurt, nuts and fruit, that's a really good example. It's not actually that much more food. It's not an entire other meal. It's just, like you said, healthy snacks on top of healthy meals that you're already having. Okay, so
absolutely.
Is there anything else in the second trimester for women to be thinking about?
Yeah, so once we get into the second trimester, iron becomes important as well. This is because baby's growing and our blood volume's starting to increase. So it's really important that we are getting enough iron as part of our diet as well. The iron requirements actually increase more in the second half of pregnancy. Saying that, we do need to be checking our iron levels at the beginning of pregnancy as well, because if they're low from the start of pregnancy, we need to be trying to get them, up into that healthy range. However, if you're starting off pregnancy in that healthy range of iron levels, it's more towards the second half of pregnancy that the requirements actually increase, which is good to know, because some women don't always tolerate iron supplements very well. And they really feel quite awful in the first trimester, feeling sick, and then they're trying to take all these iron supplements. So it's really good to check your actual iron levels and see whether you are needing them from the beginning of pregnancy, or whether you might be able to start them as some nausea and things settles towards the second trimester. Yeah.
And do most prenatal vitamins or the multivitamins with the folic acid and the iodine, do they have iron as well, or is that generally not enough to supplement in the second half of pregnancy?
So most do contain iron. There is some that don't contain iron, but the majority of your standard ones available at the chemist, like your general pregnancy multivitamins, include iron.
And would that be enough?
Generally, again, it depends on what your iron levels are from the beginning of pregnancy. So some women come into pregnancy quite deficient in iron and actually need additional iron supplements over and above their general pregnancy multivitamin. So,
yes. So best to go get it checked, talk to your dietitian, talk to your GP about whether you might need a little bit of extra help.
Absolutely. Yeah. And lots of women do, particularly as we go on further along, subsequent pregnancies as well. If we haven't got those iron stores back up from previous pregnancies, lots of women are starting off the pregnancy with lower iron stores. So good to be on top of it from the beginning. Yeah. Yeah.
And I had a lot of women, Larissa, write into me to ask if you had any advice on what food sources are great for high iron, because there's a lot of vegetarians these days who won't eat meat anyway, but there's a lot of women in pregnancy who go off meat, and the idea of having a big slab of steak to get your iron up is just awful, and that induces vomiting and nausea in of itself. So do you have any non-meat options that are high in iron that women might be able to try?
Yeah, absolutely. This is really common, I see in practice as well. Meat is one of the most common aversions that women just can't stand in pregnancy. And you can actually get iron from plant sources of food as well. I guess the key thing to keep in mind, there's two types of iron in food. So there's heme iron that we get from animal foods and non-heme iron that we get from plant-based foods. Unfortunately, we don't actually absorb the non-heme iron in plant foods as well as if it's coming from animal foods. So I think that's something to really keep in mind as well. What we can do, though, to promote the absorption of our plant-based non-heme iron is actually have some vitamin C with it. So vitamin C actually really helps the absorption of the iron from all foods. It's also why lots of iron supplements include vitamin C in them as well. Some of the non-animal sources of iron are things like whole grain breads and cereals. Lots of cereals are actually fortified with iron, which is good. All bran and bran flakes are a great thing that can be added into your other cereals to boost the iron content as well. Legumes and lentils, again, are a great source of iron as well. Tofu and nuts like almonds and cashews as well. So, and you can also get them in, your nut butters and things these days as well, which some people find a little bit easier, to add into their toast at breakfast time or something like that too. So,
Yeah, that's really good advice, because, I think a lot of women do struggle with the meat component. I guess, do you, I'm just throwing this one out there, I just thought about it now, but do you have any tips or tricks for those women who are happy to eat meat but maybe just don't want that big slab of steak? Would you recommend maybe like a mince option, or is there an easier way to digest that meat if you are feeling a bit nauseous?
Often one of the things with meat, it's for women, particularly in that first trimester, it's the hypersensitivity to smells that's the issue. So some people find that it's really the smell of meat or the preparation of meat that makes it hard to tolerate. So maybe asking your partner to prepare the meat and not be sort of in the room while it's cooking can help for some people. Also, potentially trying cold options. I mean, not all cold meats are suitable in pregnancy, things like deli meats, but, some people find they might tolerate a small can of tuna or something like that because it doesn't have that kind of hot cooking smell, and that can help. Yeah.
And just to confirm, when it comes to iron, is
Mm.
red meat the best option for iron content, or is all meat equal?
All meat does contain iron. However, red meat does contain more iron for the amount that you're going to eat, per 100 grams than other sources of meat. Ideally, red meat is your best source, but you're certainly going to get iron from other sources of meat as well, and eggs too.
Yeah, that's really good. A good little sum up of where to get iron from on top of that supplementation if required. So in the second trimester, you're saying we need about 300 more calories plus the iron. Is there anything else women should be thinking about in that second trimester?
Also thinking about our calcium and vitamin D. So as we get into the second trimester, baby skeleton's starting to develop, making sure that potentially we've had our vitamin D levels checked, particularly in southern parts of Australia where we are. Vitamin D deficiency is not uncommon. So many women will require some vitamin D supplementation in pregnancy to keep their vitamin D levels up. And making sure that you are having, some sources of calcium in the diet as well. So the key there being dairy sources, but if you are using, lots of people using nut milks and oat milks and rice milks and things like that these days in pregnancy, it's really important that you check in that those alternatives are calcium fortified as well.
I was going to ask that because I see a lot more people these days are intolerant to dairy products. So you can actually get the nut milks and things like that fortified with calcium?
That's correct. So not all are fortified with calcium, but certainly check because there's a lot of alternative options that are fortified with calcium. So,
that's really great. And on a side note, there's been some studies that have come out recently that vitamin D may be linked to a stronger pelvic floor. So if that wasn't enough motivation to vitamin D levels up and get some sunshine and take some supplements, then yes, there is a link between good vitamin D levels and a stronger pelvic floor. So
there you go. That's a fun fact. Vitamin D is a wonderful thing. It's linked with so many different things for our health. So it's definitely one to keep on top of in pregnancy.
Since I moved down, so I live quite close to the beach. I'm literally looking at the waves as we have this conversation.
Wonderful.
But interestingly, my vitamin D is perfectly normal since I started moving here because I think I'm encouraged to go outside because there's the beach to visit and whatnot. Whereas when I was living in Melbourne, I obviously didn't go outside as much, and when I was working full time and whatnot. And my vitamin D was always an issue. So it is interesting how much just being outside during the day. Is there a recommendation around being outside for vitamin D levels, like a certain amount each day that is recommended?
Look, it's tricky to give a blanket recommendation because it also depends on this. It's quite seasonal and whereabouts you're living as well. There certainly is some great resources that you can find for where you're living. I think the Cancer Council has some wonderful resources on their website about how to get some vitamin D, but also stay sun safe. Because I think that's the tricky thing with vitamin D is we've all taken on the, sun safe message so well that it has interfered with, potentially getting adequate vitamin D. So, however, you can supplement it quite effectively as well. So I know for me, I struggle sometimes to get out during the week and get some sun, particularly this time of the year where it's dark by 6 o'clock at night. Taking a supplement over those winter months, many people need to do that to keep that up as well. So again, it's one to sort of check in with your doctor, see what your levels are doing as well. And then depending on what those levels are, a dietitian can give you some guidance around how much to be taking.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe the positive of lockdowns and everyone working from home is that maybe a few more people are sneaking out for some lunch walks and things like that, given they've got a little bit more time not traveling to work.
Absolutely. That commuting time can be put into going for a walk and spending some time outside. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, is there anything else women need to be thinking about for second trimester?
No, that's the key things for second trimester. Yep.
Perfect. Yep. So moving on to the home run, the third trimester.
The third trimester. So again, our energy requirements increase a little bit more by the third trimester. Generally, it's quite a peak period of growth for babies in the third trimester. So it's when they lay down a lot of their energy stores in preparation for birth. And you're looking at around an extra 450 calories by the third trimester. And a lot of the key nutrients for the third trimester are around supporting babies' brain development. So a lot of the brain development does happen in, those final weeks of pregnancy. Two of the key nutrients for the third trimester that are really important. So the first being choline. So choline's one that there's actually quite a lot of recent research. It's kind of the new thing on the block when it comes to pregnancy nutrition. So a high intake of choline in the third trimester has been shown to improve cognitive function in offspring. And it also seems to help with placental function as well. So high intakes of choline have been shown to reduce inflammation and actually promote transport of nutrients across the placenta. I think that's really interesting.
I've never heard of choline, to be perfectly honest. So this is probably news to a lot of women.
It is, yeah. It's interesting because it's, I guess, not widely known. At the moment in Australia, a lot of women don't actually have an adequate intake of choline. So you'll see it starting to come into pregnancy multivitamins now as well, as I said, because it's quite recent research. But, yeah, definitely something to be mindful of.
And can you give us some examples, Larissa, of foods that are high in choline?
Yeah. Some of our key sources of choline are eggs. Fish and seafood, and Brussels sprouts are actually a good source of choline as well. So not that everyone loves their Brussels sprouts, but I think people are learning a bit more how to cook them and how to make them a bit more interesting than the old soggy steamed cabbage ball we had as kids.
Yeah. I was going to say, I feel like they get a really bad rap, but I quite like Brussels sprouts with, fry them up, a little bit of bacon sometimes, and I think they're actually quite nice. But yes, I think maybe the way they're cooked is very influential on the taste.
That is, absolutely the key to Brussels sprouts. So I like to do them with a bit of olive oil and garlic in the pan.
Oh, yes, that does sound good.
Is delicious. But yeah, certainly I think the key to Brussels sprouts is playing around with how you cook them.
Flavour.
Yes, exactly.
And so choline, like you were saying, will, if not already, probably be added to vitamins that you're already taking. But if not, Brussels sprouts, eggs, fish, seafood are some really good sources to add that in the third trimester. And is there anything else for women to be thinking about? Actually, coming back to, you said 450 calories. So can you give us an example, Larissa, of what that might look like? So with the 300 calories in the second trimester, that was yogurt, nuts, and a piece of fruit. So what might that look like in the third trimester?
So again, we're looking for another 150 calories. So it may be tricky to get this in just with extra snacks. You might find by the third trimester that you are eating larger meal sizes. However, I find actually by the third trimester, a lot of people get a lot of pressure in their tummy and they're actually struggling to fit in big meals. And to get enough, I guess, food and nutrition across the day, they actually switch to more having like 6 small meals throughout the day.
Yes. And I'm thinking for those women in the third trimester who might be like me, who get awful heartburn, having a big meal is the worst thing that you can do when you've got heartburn. So 6 small meals sounds much more appealing to me.
Absolutely. Certainly the 450 calories is kind of an average. Some women may need more than this by the third trimester, some a little bit less. But yes, certainly the third trimester I find and often encourage people to have 6 small meals throughout the day because it can help with the reflux. Getting enough nutrients in throughout the day and good foods as well is certainly the way to go.
Yeah, that's great advice. And is there anything else in the third trimester for women to be thinking about?
The other one, again, around brain development is omega-3s. There's 3 types of omega-3s in food that we're eating: EPA, DHA and ALA. And there's a lot of research around the role of omega-3s in early life nutrition. They've been shown to play a crucial role in babies' brain and eye development. And high intakes of omega-3 in pregnancy have actually been shown to reduce the risk of postnatal depression and preterm birth as well, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, again, it's something that I find women aren't always eating enough omega-3, particularly because people are avoiding all fish and seafood. It can be tricky to get enough 3.
We will chat about that later in terms of safe fish consumption and mercury and whatnot. But yes.
Absolutely, yeah. And also, a lot of people don't like fish. It's quite a strong flavour. Like, not everyone likes it. If you're not having sources of oily fish and things in the diet, it can actually be tricky to get enough omega-3. So it is something that we do look at supplementing for some women.
Yeah.
And I do actually have these cool at-home testing kits that you can actually test your own omega-3 levels as well to see what your actual omega-3 levels are doing. So it's
interesting.
Pretty cool.
How do you test that? Is that like a saliva swab or?
It's actually a little finger prick, so it's a little blood prick. And you just do the little prick and pop it on a little strip and send it off to a lab, and they do the testing and send it back. and give us an idea of what your omega-3 levels are.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Do you find outside of pregnancy most people struggle in the omega-3 department as well?
Yeah. It is something that, people do struggle to get enough in what they're eating. I think a lot of people, when you say, how often you're having fish, it's sort of like, oh yeah, here or there, once every now and again. It's not something that people are eating, a few times a week. It is something that people do struggle to get enough omega-3s in. Yeah.
I was just thinking, when was the last time I had fish? Because I've got to do a grocery shop today. And I always try and think the week ahead, healthy balance of everything. And I was just thinking then, I don't think we've had fish in at least probably 3 weeks. So I'm having fish for dinner tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also a lot of people aren't confident in how to cook fish.
Yes.
It is something that if you cook it all the time, you can, you get confident with it. But I just find a lot of people aren't confident in cooking it as well. And that is a bit of a barrier to people eating it regularly.
Yeah. Look, this is certainly not a cooking show, but side note, I don't know if you've done that. You probably have. You're probably an amazing cook, but I just wrap it up with lemon, garlic, parsley, and a bit of butter in like a foil package, pop it in the oven. I find it always hard to know whether it's cooked. I tend to overcook it just because the thought of raw fish freaks me out. But that is just like a winning combination for me. I've never had a terrible tasting fish when I've done that combo. So for anyone not sure, try that one. Let me know how you go.
Yes, it is. You've got a bit more leeway in the oven than in a pan, I think, of it going from undercooked to overcooked very quickly. You've got a bit more time to get that nice balance. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Oh, now I'm getting really hungry. So
this is the story of my life being a dietitian, talking about food all the time.
Yes, I can't even imagine. I'd just be thinking about it all day long, as if I don't already. Now, I wanted to talk about, was there anything else before we move on about the third trimester you wanted to mention?
No, that's the key thing.
That's the main
third trimester. Yeah.
So I think that's a really good summary of what foods and nutrients to be focusing on. And I like how you broke it down into each trimester, because I think that makes it much easier for women to understand. They go, where am I at right now? And this is what I need to focus on. Hey mamas, Laura here. How informative was that episode? I just love when professionals break down all of that juicy knowledge inside their head into bite-sized, easy to digest pieces. So hopefully that helps you understand better the different nutritional requirements at each trimester of pregnancy. And I hope it takes a lot of the guesswork out of the picture for you. Now, if you'd like to learn more from Larissa, you can find her on Instagram at prenatal_dietitian. I'd also love to hear from you over on my socials at PhysioLaura, and let me know your favorite learnings or takeaway message from today's episode. In the next few episodes of this pregnancy nutrition series, we will be chatting with Larissa about exactly what foods are best avoided during pregnancy. We'll discuss healthy weight gain, pregnancy cravings, safe caffeine consumption, low mercury fish choices, gestational diabetes, fuel for labor, postpartum nutrition, and so much more. Catch you soon for episode 2 in this 5-part pregnancy nutrition series, where we'll be covering what foods are best avoided during pregnancy, as well as safe fish and caffeine consumption. Until then, mamas, sending you wonderful pregnancy vibes, and enjoy the incredible journey that is pregnancy.